Oh, Archie. Archie, yeah, Archie never goes to sleep, but he sounds kind of sleepy, you know. The brake shoe return and hold down springs are attached between the shoes and the anchor pin. Is that true or is that false? And what in the Sam Hill is the anchor pin? The brake shoe return and hold down springs are attached between the shoes and the anchor pin. What are the hold down springs?
The hold down what?
The hold down springs.
That's the springs that go across the top.
No! Hey, she knows how to buzz. Okay, watch this. Here we go. The brake shoes are here. The anchor pin is here. You remember those little springs you got to push in and turn to release the shoes? Oh, yeah. That's the hold down springs, buddy. Or where are they? Are they between here and here? I don't think so. That's a false. When removing imperfections from a wheel cylinder bore, and I'm going to say this in an addendum to that. People, nowadays when there's a problem with a wheel cylinder, they typically replace the wheel cylinder. Now, the problem with that is, a lot of the times you've got a rounded off, or, you know, Brandon the other day rounded off everything. Oh, that was wonderful. I told you all about that. He just rounds stuff off so good. This is really good for me because I have to do lots of miracle practice, you know. He starts out with a socket that's a size too big, and he starts rounding it off, and then he goes back with a 12-point socket that's a little closer to the size, and he finishes rounding it off, and then by the time Brandon gets to me, it's just as round as this. It's just perfectly round. He goes, hey, I can't turn this. What am I supposed to do, you know? Well, you know, a little air hammer will work and we got it loose. But one way or another.
I'm going to give me an air hammer.
Yeah. Now, years ago, when we did brakes, every time we put brake shoes on, we built the wheel cylinders. That was just a foregone conclusion. You're going to build a wheel cylinder unless they're really in bad shape. And if you pull that little boot back and you see fluid in there, the wheel cylinder's leaking, you better replace it or rebuild it one. Now, most times, like I say, what does a wheel cylinder cost? Anybody know? Huh? 8 to 10. Yeah, I think the ones that I got for that Ranger were 12. But the fact is, they don't cost all that much. And for safety purposes, it's a good idea to pop a new wheel cylinder on there, because that way, you know, they're not hard to rebuild. However, when removing imperfections from a wheel cylinder board, do not remove more than 0.02 of an inch, which is 0.06 of a millimeter, by the way, beyond the original inside diameter. That's false. You can't get away with you can't remove anything from the inside diameter. All you're basically trying to do is make it smooth. Okay? Now, a lot of times you'll have little rust pits in there that, you know, you can't rebuild it that way. 3, a leaking wheel cylinder with deep scores should be replaced, not rebuilt. True. That is obviously true. You don't usually see a wheel cylinder with scores. I mean, you can, but only if dirt's been in there, we'll have scores. Typically, you'll have. What that means? That's like scratches. You know, whenever you score something, like for instance, if you're working with metal and you get ready to cut it, and you take something that looks like a scratch-all and you scratch it so you'll know where you're going to cut. You're scoring it. That's basically what it is. Or if you're taking an alternator apart, and you want to make sure that when you take an alternator apart, you don't put the halves back together in any of the other, you know, positions, because they got to be put back. You score it before you take it apart, and that way you line the scores up when you put it back together. That's how it works. I mean, if you scratch it, it's going to be scratched. You know, when I was taking the distributor gear off of a Ford distributor, I would always put little scratches on the shaft right there where the, you know, gear hole went. That's another story. I don't know where I went on with there, but anyway, sometimes brake self-adjusters don't work because the driver seldom applies the parking brake. The parking brake on a lot of these with self-adjusters is when the adjuster does its best work, right? And so what it's saying is basically pretty much true. If you don't apply the parking brake on some vehicles, now I tell you, the most ingenious brake adjusters I ever saw. And these Germans can come up with some totally simple and amazing stuff on some of their German cars. But on some of those Volkswagens, not on all of them, but on the Volkswagen Rabbits, some of them, and this is cool as all get out. And somebody else, I don't know if anybody else has seen this or not. Oh, there's my marker. They would put right here a little spring. I mean, they'd put a little thing with little teeth on it that was shaped like this. And it would have a hole in it. And it was designed in such a way that it had a spring on it that was pulling down on it a little with a gentle pull all the time. As the brake shoes wore out, this thing would go click, 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 click. It had a spring and a wedge, and that was all there was to the adjustment. And you know what the cool thing was? And remember now, Volkswagen Rabbits and Bugs typically had lug bolts instead of lug studs. So when you pull the lug bolt out, you'd see a hole there. Well, if you knew about this, you could turn that drum around to where that lug hole was lined up with this, and you stick a screwdriver through that hole and go yip, and you just stretch that spring, and yip, the shoes would come in. See how simple that was? Yeah. Why didn't more people do that? You know, it's a whole lot easier to put together. You know, just hook the spring with a little pair of pliers, and you didn't have all this, you know. I mean, I like that myself. Now, not all of the Volkswagen Rabbits are like that. Some of them don't have that kind of adjustment, and I don't, you know, and some of them are, you know, you can have a lot more springs than you need on a lot of them. Okay. Number 4, this is true if you want to get that one right. When a leak occurs where the master cylinder meets the vacuum booster, the fluid seldom leaks into the booster itself. That's false. It goes right on in there. I will tell you something else about that. If you look, I don't know if you've ever done this, you look at a brake master cylinder where it bolts up to the vacuum booster, you're going to see a lot of the times where some brake fluid has ate some paint off of the booster. You see that? That's normal if it's not too excessive. Don't think you've got to replace the master cylinder every time you see that, because there's a little bit of fluid that's going to be there, and there's a little bit that's going to come out of there on a lot of vehicles. Now, you don't see it on every vehicle, but if you just see a little bit of that, that's not the kiss of death for the master cylinder. You're going to see a little bit. It may even tell you that in your book, because it seems like it does. All right. When measuring the diameter of a damaged brake drum, you can find the discard diameter cast into the drum. That is typically true. Now, one of the things that's annoying to those of us that don't have our conversion calculator in our back pocket is a lot of the times it's in millimeters. And we may have something that measures it in inches, you know, so we got to be able to convert that. All right. And now if anybody got a smartphone, you can probably pull down a conversion calculator. Ain't a big deal, see? So, you know how much we use our smartphones for? All the time. We're using them for something. You know? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You can actually pull up stuff that will give you OBD2 codes, all kinds of stuff.
There's an app for OBD2 codes.
Yeah.
It's like $6.99.
Yeah, it don't cost much, but I mean, it's cool. They got a Honda app that's free that tells you all kinds of neat stuff about Honda stuff.
Yeah, that's Honda. That's Honda.
Yeah. Well, you know, front-wheel drive vehicles have duo servo drum brakes on the rear wheels. What's duo servo, guys?
Just like on they're mirrored images of each other.
Well, remember this. Remember that. Which one of those is duo servo and which one is leading trailing? Do you remember? That was for brake test 1, huh?
Different. The two different shoes.
The leading trailing is the first one and duo servo is the second one.
Leading trailing is this one right here. That's the one that's anchored at the top of the bottom. If you can take the rear wheels off any front-wheel drive car, you're going to see this kind of brake, the leading trailing on the rear. So that means that question is wrong. You're not going to see duo servo brakes on the back of a front-wheel drive vehicle. Excuse me. You'll usually see them on something like a Ranger or anything that's got, you know, if it's got drum brakes on it. Like most vehicles today have got 4-wheel disc brakes, and they'll have some little miniature drum brakes for the park brake. Barreling is a term used to describe a condition of greater wear toward the drum's rim. Barreling. We're talking about the brake drum, right? Okay, here's your brake drum. In a perfect world, the brake drum is shaped like that, if I have a cutaway of it, right? If the drum is worn out like this, it kind of reminds you of an old barrel. Yep. That's what they're talking about. Now, look at what the question says. Barreling is a term used to describe a condition of greater wear toward the brake drum's rim. Is that true or is that false? What's the rim? The rim is up here, guys. Greater wear toward the center. That question is dead false. Service drum brakes stop the wheels from turning because of what? Service drum meaning not park. You know, when they say service drum brakes, they're not talking about park brakes there. That's a different deal. Okay, service drum brakes stop the wheels from turning because of what? A, friction between tires and the road surface. B, hydraulic pressure against brake shoes. C, friction between brake shoe and drum. Or D, mechanical action of brake shoe and drum. That's going to be friction between brake shoe and drum. Right? And they still use asbestos. Don't blow the dust off or you'll kill yourself with mesothelioma. Make sure you wash it off with something wet. Right? All right. And we talked about this before, too. What if you are working on, like, say, a rear-wheel drive pickup truck that's got drum brakes, right? And you realize when you pull the brakes off that this whole thing is a mess. It's all wet. and you don't know if it's axle grease or brake fluid.
Taste it.
Taste it.
Yeah, you gotta taste it.
You watch the guy at the tire shop. You watch the guy at the brake shop. If he sees that, he can taste brake fluid. That axle grease you can taste it. You ever had brake fluid in your mouth?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what it tastes like. You know, you just put it on the tip of your tongue, make sure you spit it out. Don't swallow it, obviously. But you will not. But I tell you something else too. Yeah, you tasted it good, didn't you? Something else that we do is whenever we see something dripping on the pavement, we don't. It looks like it might be antifreeze, but we're not sure. There are some things that have a distinctive taste to them. Just touch it to your tongue. If it's sweet, it's antifreeze. That's all there is to it. Or listen to this. What if you see something dripping inside the car on the carpet, and you pop the cap off the radiator and you look and heck, it's full of antifreeze. So is this coolant that's coming from the heater core dripping on the carpet, or is this a condensation from the air conditioner? Because a lot of well, how do you know?
Oh, okay.
All right. So what I mean is, and this is going to sound gross and everything. People say, you know, like that. But you got to, your fingers are washable, and you spit this stuff out. It's not like you're eating something that's going to kill you in 4 days. You're not going to eat it. You're going to spit it out. But the fastest way you can tell, you can have a fancy little tool to pour it in. Oh yeah, this is a hogwash. You take that little bit of something dripping off under there and taste it. If it's sweet, heater core. That's how you make your diagnosis super fast. If it's antifreeze, it's the dead-gum heater core. That's all it can be. If it's clear water, we got a condensation problem with our air conditioner. That way we're not going off in the wrong direction. You see what I'm saying? We got some reason or another. Like if the evaporator drain is stopped up, and it won't drip any water on the ground whenever it's, this is actually getting off into the air conditioner thing. But what I'm telling you is sometimes that's the quickest way you can find out what it is you're looking at. And that's just, that's one of the things I teach. You can do whatever you want to. But when your buddy has already figured out what's wrong and he's fixed it and the next car's out and you didn't want to taste of the stuff that was dripping off the heater core, that's because you didn't make the diagnosis. Or you can get him to taste it if he will. So. And most of them will do that, So anyway, I don't know how many people. That's like some of these people say, when I was driving down the road and I had to put the steering wheel on the shaft straight, I would drive down the road and I would leave the nut loose, and whenever I got the steering wheel a little crooked, I would pull it off while the truck was going and put it back on.
That's safe. That's real safe.
You ever do anything like that?
Hey, I had one come on.
Did you have a good time? Yeah. All right. Well, you know what I'm saying. What was funny to me, I was talking to a guy from Simi Valley, California, that writes for Motor Age, and he and I were talking on a private email, and he says, I feel maybe kind of stupid, but I used to do that because it was the quickest way to get it done. And he says, I'd make sure there was nobody around that I was going to crash into, and I don't hit no stuff. I just jerk it off, stick it back on it right quick. You get away with it. Well, I never had a mishap like that. I'm not telling you to do that because nowadays, most of the time, they won't go one way anyway. But in the olden days, you could actually, some of the front end guys would set the toe and then they pull the steering wheel off and put it on. Then they wind up with the thing only turning part way one way and more the other way, which was not good either. All right, let's see. Let me go back in here. What could not cause one brake to drag? A, damaged backing plate. B, wheel cylinder piston not returning. C, drum wobble. Or D, improperly adjusted master cylinder push rod. We're on question number 12.
Number 12?
Did I skip one?
You skip 2. 10 and 11.
What? Where? Number 10. Back up. I'm sorry. That's my bad. After braking, hydraulic fluid flows from wheel cylinders to the master cylinder because why? After braking, hydraulic fluid flows back to the master cylinder. Why? A, because releasing the brakes makes the hydraulic pressure fall. B, springs move the shoes away from the drum. C, heat generated by friction raises the temperature of the brake fluid and the fluid expands. That's kind of hogwash, isn't it? C, the brake lines open when the brake is released. I would say the springs move the shoes away from the drum. Number 10, that's going to be a B. 11. And let me tell you something, guys. Let me mention this something while I'm at. When you're in the midst of taking these tests, and these tests were professionally written by the people that put the textbook together, and for the most part, they're pretty good tests. You get used to taking tests. You get used to hitting the books. You get used to doing this every day. That's the prime time to go hit the ASE tests. You see what I'm saying? That's why Jesse James Duke, right close to the end of my program, went to the ASE test and passed all 8 of them because he was used to taking tests. He was used to thinking the right way. So he didn't make a perfect grade on every score, but he passed them all. That was the point.
What do you got to get it? Make pass?
Huh? 70.
A what?
70.
That's it?
If for 50 questions, you got to get 35 of them right. Now, there's half the mechanics that take them fail them.
Wait, what are we talking about?
ASE tests.
Why though? I mean,
Because they ain't used to taking tests. You know what I'm saying? They're pulling steel every day. They're looking stuff up in the book and all that, but they're just not used to taking tests. And some people choke up whenever they're going to take a test because they're terrified of what the results are going to be. And whenever I take a test, I just go in there totally relaxed. If I fail, I fail. You know, but I do my best. You know, I've never studied for an ASE test, and I've never failed one.
I'm about to say you passed them every time.
Yeah. Well, I've passed them a bunch of times, but the fact is, you know, some people are scared. They're all just like this. They're scared to death, and they bone up on this stuff trying to. There's Archie. We just wondered when he was ever going to show up.
We were all just about to leave.
That's it.
I feel you.
All right. Anyway, when drum brakes are applied, when drum brakes are applied, the brake shoes move by what? Hydraulic pressure acting on a piston. That is not rocket science there. What could not cause one brake to drag? One brake. Now we're talking one brake. We're only talking about one brake. Can a damaged backing plate do that? Yes, it can. If a damaged backing plate's keeping the shoe from returning, it'll do that. What about a wheel cylinder piston not returning? If it's left sucker's locked up and it's holding that shoe out, yeah, it's going to do that. Now getting the drum off is a bear in a situation like that. Especially when somebody has actually worn big grooves into the drum with the rivets, and you start trying to pull that thing apart, man, you gotta go in there with a screwdriver, push that adjuster away, and go backwards away with the.
I always just kick them.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Sometimes that works, sometimes it don't. All right, I've kicked them too. But, anyway, drum wobble. Actually, an improperly adjusted master cylinder push rod is not going to make just one brake drag. It's going to be common to all the wheels. So that's how you got to think like that. Which could not require a driver to exert unusual force to brake. In other words, which of these could not cause you to have to push harder? I tell you what's funny. Our welding instructor drove his little S10 Chevrolet pickup for 2 or 3 years, needing a brake booster. The brake booster was totally junk on that thing, and he had a strong leg anyway, so he just applied a little bit more muscle to stop it, right? And so whenever the brake booster was $150, he finally got around to letting us change it. I actually ordered one, and when it came in, I kept it in my stock back here until he got ready for it, and then I had to transfer it back to work orders to charge him out for it. But anyway, when he put that thing on, I said, Jackie, I says, when you're driving this, you got to realize that now you have power brakes, so you don't have to mash the brake pedal as hard. Well, habit always takes over, and the first time he stopped down there, he was sliding the wheel. Okay, loose rivets on brake shoes. Would that require a driver to exert unusual force to brake? No. Well, wet, hot, or damaged brake linings could. Brake shoes out of adjustment could. Wheel cylinder piston stuck could. Any of that stuff. But the first one, the loose rivets on the brake shoes, I actually worked at a shop where we rebuilt brake shoes. We'd take the old linings off and rivet new linings on them. And, of course, usually it was for big trucks, but we did it. I had machines, dunk for it, crept those rivets. Which one of the following steps is done first when rebuilding a wheel cylinder? That's number 14. We got to rush through this. Huh?
Remove the boots.
Remove the boots. Is that what you would do?
Yeah.
14. What about? Yeah, absolutely. This question right here is one that I'm going to have to go and edit. You know what they say the right answer is, and you can tell this is stupid. Push out the pistons, cups, and springs. Well, you can't do that until you get the boots off. Give me a break. I'll make a mark on that one and fix that in my answer key. That's stupid. 10 points off for the people who wrote the book. All right, which one of the following steps is done last when rebuilding a wheel cylinder? Which one of the following steps is done last when rebuilding a wheel cylinder? Remove surface corrosion, push out pistons, cups.
Lubricate the parts.
Lubricate the parts. Yeah, baby, that's what I'm talking about. All right, 16. Which one of the following steps is done first when installing brake shoes? Which one of the following? Attach the brake shoe return springs, install the self-adjuster, attach the brake shoes to the backing plate, install the parking brake. I'm going to attach the brake shoes to the backing plate pretty much. Of course, you know how I showed you out there. You attach the back one first, then you let your spring hold the other one, so on and so forth. Which of the following would not cause brakes to grab? That's whenever you're giving it a little bit of brake pressure and it slides the wheels, Yeah. Let's see. Which it would not cause them to grab?
Oh, okay.
What about threaded drums? What does that mean?
You got lines in your drum?
No, that means that whenever you turn the brake, do you remember how you change the speed of that cutter? If you speed that up too fast, you're going to be cutting threads in that drum. And when you mash the brake, you know, those shoes are going to try to walk on those threads and all that kind of stuff. But actually, the answer to 17 is basically a leaking wheel cylinder. That's not going to make the brakes grab. You know, whatever. It's usually going to make it more slippery there. All right. That concludes that test.